And so I started to look into it and I was just floored. And so, without going into all the details, because this really isn't about what happened in B school, that is just a representation of a bigger issue that we'll go into. But I, so I did a live yesterday, and basically what I said was that we are in 2020. It is May 31st of 2020. And I have actually been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work since 2008. Not in the coaching industry, obviously, but like in school districts, in nonprofit organizations. Like, this is something that has been a big part of my work in my life for a very long time. And when I came into the coaching industry and realized that the conversations that I had been having in my regular, like life, in my regular work, had not crossed over yet into this sector, into the personal development sector, into coaching. And as I was, as most coaches do, going through the process of like refining our niche and trying to figure out like who we serve and what's our unique contribution, I realized that I needed to start talking about this. I needed to start bringing the work that I was doing from the nonprofit field, from the education field, and bringing it into the conversation around how we coach and how we build businesses that support the transformation of people, because that's what this work is about, right? So, I shared that in the live. And what I also said was that we need to stop having to learn this lesson, right? Like us as an industry. Again, I don't want to go too deep into what happened in B school. It breaks my heart to even have to talk about it because I love Marie Forleo's work. So it's a really tender, it's just a really interesting place to be. But we've seen this before, right? Like we've seen leaders and we've seen leaders and coaches and people with big platforms and people with small platforms like make mistakes, and some small, some big, and the response from the community when mistakes are made. And we shouldn't have to learn that lesson more than once. And that's what I was talking about in the group, right? Or in the live yesterday. And the other thing that I was talking about yesterday is that this work is not about just being a better person. It's not about knowing what to say so that your community members don't get upset, so that you don't get dragged. It's not crisis management work. That's what a lot of people think it is, and I get a lot of phone calls for that kind of stuff, unfortunately. But it shouldn't be that. This work is about people's lives. It's about outcomes. And I just want to set that context, right? When we talk about inequity and oppression and racism and things like that, what we're talking about is that right now, and I wrote this in the article that was published yesterday, that right now you can give me a sheet with someone's race and their zip code, and I can give you a pretty accurate prediction about their life. I can give you a pretty accurate prediction of what kind of educational outcomes that person will have. I can give you an accurate position about their health outcomes. I can give you an accurate prediction about their life expectancy and how they might die, right? That is disgusting. I'm trying not to get emotional when I think about this, right? It is the fact that right now, life outcomes, socioeconomic status, like all of these things is tied to race, is tied to economics, is tied to zip code, right? And it shouldn't be that way. And when I think about the coaching industry and think of the core work of the coaching industry, which is about transformation and helping people get ahead, whether that's in business or in life or in their health, right? If we're not paying attention to equity, right, we are replicating that system of oppression, right? And it's not something that you do by accident. It's not that you like have good intentions and care about people and somehow account for those things. That is not how it works. You have to be explicit in your action to undo those things, because it's inherent, right? It's like, it's not your fault that it's that way. It's the way that the world was built. I mean, and this isn't a history lesson about that, but so we're going to talk about that more. But for a lot of you, I don't know if this is the first time you're meeting me or hearing about me. So you might just be like, who is this woman that is like all of a sudden overnight all over the internet, like all over my newsfeed, which I deeply appreciate every single person who has shared and has shown up. But let me just take a minute to tell you a little bit about who I am. Yeah. All right. So my name is Trudy LeBrun. I live in, I'm from Hartford, Connecticut and New Britain, Connecticut, Central Connecticut, and where I still live. I have a master's degree in psychology, a specialization in social change, in psychology and social change and public administration. And so basically my master's degree work, my graduate work was about how we build systems for change. And so my professional life, that has translated to what, like how we create change through business. I believe that business is a vehicle for liberation, that it can be if we want, if we approach it that way. And then I've completed all of my coursework for my PhD in social psychology, studying the same things. So I approach this work from both a practical sense, I'm an entrepreneur, but also academic, and also as a person who was a teen mom. I had my first son when I was 15 years old, my second son when I was 16 years old. I dropped out of high school in 9th grade, and every milestone that I've achieved, whether it was just like finishing school and going to college or graduating college or getting a master's degree or becoming a college professor at 31 years old or running a multiple six-figure business, I have fought for every one of those milestones. And at every one of those milestones, there have been people who had a lot of ideas about what my life should be, what it shouldn't be, what I was capable of, what I wasn't capable of. And so when I think about equity work and how we create transformation in people's lives, it's personal. It is very personal, because I know what it's like to sit in front of somebody who is looking at you and is supposed to help and is holding on to a lot of stereotypes about what you're supposed to be, and it impacts the way that they serve you. And I also know what it feels like to sit in rooms, even where the leader is doing their best, but to be in rooms where the other people in the room were not aware, and where people were having, like, saying microaggressions and saying things that were racist and stereotypical, and and it's just not a welcoming place to be. So like I said, I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work since 2008. In 2017, I started whispering about it on the internet to coaches. And then in early 2018, I offered my first course, Diversity and Equity for Coaches. And I am almost positive that that was the first course available to this community, in this field around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was one of the first people talking about it. And I was trying to talk loudly so that we wouldn't have to be here, right? So that it saddens me that it's, that it takes for people to make big mistakes for others to pay attention. And also, like, I'm grateful to be a trusted voice. I always tell folks in this field that I am also an INFP and projector because people in this field get what that means. And so I always like to share that. It's just a fun little note. So that's me. And I've been, in business since 2013 in a different iteration. And I've been doing this work exclusively with coaches for a couple years. I work with individuals who are just, earlier stages in business, and also big companies. I'm the diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for Hay House Publishing and a number of other big brands that you would know, supporting their CEOs and their teams. So this is work that people are starting to do, but not enough, you know? Okay, so where do we go? I have notes here. We already talked about the live. We talked about that we should know better. We don't have to learn this lesson again. And that coaching, I just want to really hit that on the head, that coaching, the coaching industry is really prime for this. Like it is really the place to have, I believe, to have some of the most impactful outcomes here, right? And when I talk about impact, I'm not talking just about like how many people are on your Instagram and how many people are on your email list. I'm talking about actual transformation. I'm talking long-term impact, right? Like, how are people better off as a result of working with you in the long term? And how are the people that those people interact with better off as a result of working with you? And we can take that, what I call a dynamic approach to impact, where we're measuring what we do across different dimensions. And that's what, that's what this is about. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. Is we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to walk you through the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. These are words that are like flying around right now, and I really want to set the context and make sure that everybody knows what those things mean. I'm going to talk about what it means to have a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and impact in your business. And, I also want to say that the reason that I like working with entrepreneurs and in this space is because it's not an either or, right? It's not about like, I have a business and then I have this diversity initiative on the side. Like that's not how we should be approaching it. It should be one and the same. Your equity initiatives, your commitment to equity is the same as your commitment to making money and paying yourself and paying your team. I don't think that one comes at the cost of another, right? I really believe that we can build profitable, sustainable, responsible businesses. I'm all about that, right? And that we can do it in a way that really puts our values, whether those values are around like the environment or, whatever your values are and your commitments are, we can build those things right into the fabric of your business so that there's never a question about where you stand. And that's where people run into problems, is when there's a question about where you stand. People shouldn't have to wonder. People shouldn't have to wonder, especially if you are an influencer, you have lots of followers. People shouldn't have to wonder what your commitment is. It should be explicit from the beginning, right? It should be so explicit in the same way that we're explicit about our niches, right? That whole idea of attracting and repelling people. If we put our commitments and like where we stand on some of these issues right into that, then we'll attract the community that agrees with it or that is in alignment with us. Maybe they don't have to agree about every single thing, but at least they know where you stand. And then I'm going to give you some next steps that you can take after this call. All right. So are y'all ready to dive in? Yes. Give me some hands. Let me just look through here. Look at all this. This is just so great. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of the ways that some of the potential things that we can do where we are replicating that system of oppression, and that where we are taking racist patterns and oppressive patterns and kind of having them in the way that we run our business or the way that we show up online. Again, this isn't about like whether you did it on purpose or not. This is just like, what it is, what we see. And I said this in my live too. I see them because people are constantly sending me screenshots of what's happening in like group programs and Facebook groups and all of this stuff. So people are talking about this. So I know that it's happening, right? So some of those ways are, the first big one, and this is kind of what we saw transpire yesterday, is silencing, right? So silencing and making people invisible. And the way that we do that is by deleting posts, Now, I'm not saying you never delete a post. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're deleting posts that, or shutting off comments, or doing that kind of stuff on posts where people are just trying to have conversations about what's happening in the world, and people are putting in the emotional labor to like either support each other or educate each other on what's happening. When you shut those things off, you're silencing people. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make. And I get why they do it. I get it, because it makes you nervous. Like, you start seeing that stuff on your Facebook feed or your Instagram wall, and it's just like, what do I say? I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's super uncomfortable, right? People have expectations of you, but the worst thing to do is like erase it like it never happened. We have to be, this is all about like leaning into the discomfort and being, and really being prepared in advance, and we'll get there. The next one is like by dehumanizing people, and also dehumanizing and distancing people's experiences. So when we tell people, especially people in the entrepreneur space whose brands are personal, right? So many of us have brands that are tied, like our name is our brand, like we share stuff about our life. We invite people in behind the scenes in all kinds of ways. So when we tell people, our clients, our community members, oh, we don't talk about that stuff here. We don't talk about politics here. We don't talk about justice issues here. We're basically saying that that part of your identity is not welcome, especially when we're talking about that in relation to Black and brown people in your community, right? If someone can show up and talk about their partner or their children or what they did on vacation, someone should be able to show up and say, the things that are happening in the world right now make me afraid. Or, like, I don't know how to respond to issues of race in my business. Like, I need support. To say, though, that's not what we talk about here, is like ignoring a complete swaths of people's existence. And we cannot do that. We have to understand that politics, that identity, that justice is part of people's personal brands, and not just brands, but their lives, right? Those two things cannot be disconnected from each other. And so you need to be, so if you're doing work, especially work around personal brands, you need to be prepared to hold that space. It's the right thing to do. And so this is always my caveat, or don't be prepared, right? Like, don't, but then don't act like you are, right? Be explicit, like upfront on your sales page. We don't talk about politics or identity here, so that you don't attract anybody who is going to be expecting that they can show up fully, right? We tell people all the time, be fully expressed, show up as your authentic self. Oh, but don't talk about that. We can't do that. You have to, if you're going to tell people to show up as their authentic self and to speak up and to take up space, right? We need to be ready to hold that. We need to be ready to support them, right? And you can be, that's the thing. That's what all of this is about. You can be ready. Okay. The next way that we replicate systems of oppression and patterns connected to racism, racist patterns, is by centering whiteness. And so, like I said before, this work is not about being a better white person. It's not about like getting a gold star. It's not about like who you contributed to, or like how you feel about what someone said. Like, that is not what it's about. It's about, and that's why I almost called this workshop Show Up and Lead. And I was like, no, this isn't about, it is in a way about leadership, but really it's about service, right? It's about how we show up and serve, and understand that we can use our leadership to be in service of bigger causes, of bigger needs, of people at the margins, right? So when we make it about ourselves and how, uncomfortable we are and how upset we are, then we're basically silencing people who are most affected. And so there are ways to talk about your pain, right? And places to talk about your pain. That one's important too. Places to talk about your pain, being in community with other people where you can be held, like you have to have that, but it's not in your, you have to understand that like it's not in your public persona where, you know, your audience's responsibility to hold you in that way. You need to have other systems in place to do that. Also, some of these patterns show up in the way we run our business, our policies, our practices, you know, certain clauses and contracts, certain ways that we hire or fire people, like the way that we treat our clients and our team members really should reflect the values that we have. One of my favorite questions to ask people is like, okay, like you tell me your values. People tell me they're values driven and that they value love and they value equity or diversity or equality, whatever words they use. And I ask them, how do they fire people? Right? How do you fire people? Where is love in your firing process or equity in your firing process? Like when you are values driven and when you have a commitment to these things, it should be baked in to every part of your business, right? And there are ways to do that. It's about being able to stand by every single action, right? Like that's what you want to be able to do. So thinking through policies, practices, things that, you know, where have you been in communities with other people where you felt like something just wasn't fair or something right, or, you know, just really starting to interrogate, what am I replicating because I was taught that's how we should do it, for example. And, you know, this is not meant to be a comfortable conversation. So I'm just going to say, for example, asking people to sign contracts over the phone without having the time to really read them is an example, right? Like that could be, depending on other clauses in your agreement, that could be really oppressive. So we need to be thinking about like, how am I, what did I learn that needs to come into question? And how do I modify my practice so that every single thing I do is in alignment with my values and my commitments.
I'm putting the cheese in. You want cheese in your eggs?
Oh, someone's making eggs. Can everyone just check their mute button? I probably could use some cheese in my eggs though. Lastly, coaching techniques that are not culturally responsive, right? So what I mean by that is that we have, you know, many people go to a coaching school or, you know, we get trained, and we need to start looking at where those techniques came from, like what science basis, you know, are those things rooted in, and are they culturally competent, right? Are they appropriate to ask to every single person, right? Like how do we, for example, you know, saying to people, we get this a lot in spiritual bypassing, you know, talking about how everything is meant to be and like the universe has a plan for you may not be the right response, right? To someone telling you that they're experiencing a microaggression, for example, a race-based microaggression, or some, you know, some other type of oppression or marginalization in their life. Now, I'm not saying that you can't believe that, right? You can totally believe that the universe has a plan for everyone, and all of that can also be true at the same time as you meet the needs in a responsible way of the client that's sitting in front of you. And so we have to have a nuanced practice. And this is true in teaching. Like, let's just, let's not think about coaching for a second. Anyone who has ever been to school, ever, right, knows that teachers will modify the way that they teach, right? Good teachers modify the way that they teach to suit the students' learning needs, right? We know this. We know that this is true. We know that there's a lot of work being done around culturally responsive teaching and making sure that the curriculum that we're using is appropriate for the children that are sitting in front of us. The same thing is true anytime you're serving any client. It's not you can't have a one size fits all approach. You need to have a nuanced approach that needs to take into consideration cultural context. And so that's called like a culturally responsive approach to your coaching and to your teaching, or some of us here fall probably more into the teacher category. And so when you don't have that, when you don't have that nuanced approach, and when you're doing some of these other things, we are at high risk of perpetuating racism, perpetuating systemic oppression. Your business might exactly replicate that pattern by accident, just because, not by accident because it's by design, but you may not even realize it, right? It's unconscious because that's just how you were taught, because that's what somebody else was taught, and that's just how it works, right? That's just how, if we never are putting any of these things into question, we just end up with the same old. All right, so let me know. I know there's a lot of us here and it might be hard to take questions, but I just want to make sure that like people are following. How can we do that when we're teaching or coaching a mixed race group? Yes, you can absolutely do it teaching a mixed race group. It's all about nuance. It's about holding space and taking the position that like not everything works for everybody. And so when you have that approach and when your clients know that, they'll be able to kind of understand that like one person might get a different technique or modification of an assignment or something like that. So they can like, so that they can have a better outcome. But it's definitely possible to have, we have mixed race programs all the time. And it's definitely possible. Are any coaching programs that are training programs in coach training in a more equitable way? Emma, we are looking at that. And we haven't seen any that are like directly addressing that, like culturally responsive coaching practice that exists. We may have to build one. But yeah, we are trying to kind of filter through things and like share what we're finding. Okay. So let's see. All right, so we're gonna go into some like definitions. I'm gonna talk a little bit about diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion. And I always love to share this. I'm gonna just share my screen for a moment. And what I would love for you to do is just take a look at this image and write down. And you can write this down in the chat, or you can write it down on, if you have like a notebook or something in front of you. Let me just pull up that picture. Screen share. All right, so just take a minute to look at this and notice what you notice. Okay, I'm seeing some of these questions that I'm going to answer for you, but yeah, right. This is a powerful image. So let me break down a little bit, like what, as you're looking at this, like let me explain a little bit of what we're seeing. So on the equality side of this, we are seeing, let me move my chat. We are seeing that everyone has the same, everyone has one box, right? And when we think about, sometimes when we think about like diversity, we think about this. We say things like, I treat everyone the same, right? We hear that a lot. I treat everyone the same. I don't see color, you know. I don't want to treat people differently, right? And I get that. I get why. But this is what that results to, right? We give people the same things, and their outcome isn't the same, right? When we look at equity, when we think about equity, what we're doing is differentiating our support, right? To account for certain structural barriers. And so on the equity side, you see that people, you know, that there's a different distribution of boxes. But what's important is to notice is that the other things that are important to notice about this is that the ground is tiered, right? We have a tiered ground, and in addition to the ground being tiered, the fence is higher on one side, and the fence is higher in the place where the ground is lowest, right? And that's the accurate representation of like the world, right? The people who are whose starting place is farther back, right? Farther back, have higher barriers. There are just more things to have to get over in order to have the same outcome, in this case, watching a baseball game, right? And so we need to actually have a disproportionate or a proportionate amount of effort based on people's need, and that creates equity. Right? So some of the things that I challenge people to do when they're looking at client outcomes, for example, is to disaggregate that data by race, right? So if you have a big practice and we look at your attrition rate, right? Because, you know, some people leave the program, right? If we look at what the proportion of people are, if you know, what the attrition rate is in proportion to certain demographics like race, we might find some really interesting information. Like that actually gives you a lot of information, right? So if we find that people who are from marginalized communities are leaving the program at higher rates than your white clients, that means there's a structural problem that we need to understand, right? And so taking that on is brave. Like some people don't even want to look at that information. But if you want a sustainable business, if you want to change people's lives, if you really want to like take a stand, look at the data. Like let's pull it out and let's figure out how we can solve some of those, you know, some of those challenges. Ariel, I see your hand. Can you, hold on. Let me actually get to you. I can unmute you. Go ahead. What's your question?
Hi, thank you. This question came up before this box came up, and now it's here, and it's affirming that the question of, so I notice one of the things that gets in the way of me fully wanting to support Black people in different ways, whether we're in a coaching situation or something like that, is the fear that in those extra boxes and wanting to give in an extra tiered because of those extra boxes, that they're going to feel that I'm like looking down on or seeing them as a victim. And
Sure.
And I'm curious, like, how do I, like, can you speak to that? Because can you speak to that? How do you navigate that?
Absolutely. Thank you. I love that question. Okay, so let me say this. Just because you have and are prepared to respond in culturally responsive ways and to differentiate your support doesn't mean that you have like a way you work with white folks and a way you work with Black and brown folks. That is not what we're doing, right? What we're doing, what we want to do is build our skills so that we have a vast set of supports in place for our clients who need them. And we want to build a practice where we are in community with people and have regular practices like consent, like asking people what they need, and then they can tell you, right? They can tell you if it's something that they need or not. So just being in like really high relationship with people, and for those of you with big teams, this is stuff that we can train your teams to be able to do. But yeah, so it's not about like I had a client come to me one time where he had this like, it wasn't a scholarship. It was like prize for people of color. And I was like, no, we can't have, that is not what we can have. Like, there are plenty of people of color who are wealthy and, who are at all income levels who can pay make whatever investment they want to make. If you want to have economic, a program around economic inclusion, we can build that out, but it has to be voluntary. It has to be something that people are opting into. So, and here's another analogy that I give when I'm talking about this work. So this work is about putting the elevator in your business. That's what I call it. It's like we have to put the elevator in, right? And raise your hand real quick if you've ever taken an elevator. Let's just look and see. Raise your hand. Probably every single person has taken an elevator, right? So elevators are in buildings, right? Mandatory in buildings that have multiple floors, because people who cannot walk upstairs need to have, who have a physical limitation, they can't get up the stairs, need to have a way to get upstairs. So it's a accessibility issue, right? That is why the elevator is mandated to be there. But everybody benefits from the elevator, right? And so when you put the elevator into your business by building culturally competent skills, by looking at your policies and practices, by preparing to know how to respond in times of social crisis, you make the experience better for everyone, including all of your white clients, right? So this is about, equity is about like serving all people and having the outcomes be achievable for all. I want to show you one more slide, or one more picture rather. Because this is what it's about. Putting the elevator in your business is about being prepared to contribute to justice, to removing the barriers in the first place, right? Remember what I said earlier about people's lives being predictable by race and zip code? That's what this is about. And in your business, it may sometimes feel like, oh, like I have this business, like this, I'm a coach, like how do I contribute to the breaking down of the fence? You do that by creating containers that have high expectations and high levels of safety for all the people you serve, so that they can have incredible outcomes, transform their lives, and then they can transform their communities. So we all have a role in this. This is what it's about. Okay. I saw Catalina. Can you see whose hand is up? I'm having a hard time finding it, but I did see a hand.
It's Carrie Beth Daly.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi Trudy, thank you. I actually don't have a question. I originally was raising it to share about the picture you had put up, but you covered it.
Oh, okay. Okay,
thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right. So where are my? So that's diversity. I mean, that's equity, and the difference between equity and equality. I think it's a really foundational piece for us to know. I also want to talk about the difference between diversity and inclusion. And again, one of my favorite things to say when I speak on stages is that welcome is not inclusive. Welcome is not inherently inclusive. I want you to write that down, and I want you to memorize that. Welcome is not inclusive. Just because you say that everybody is welcome doesn't mean that you have taken the steps necessary to ensure that everyone has been thoughtfully included in the experience, right? One is about, it's the difference between, I love my analogies, you'll see. It's the difference between inviting people over for dinner and just be like, oh yeah, you're welcome to come. Like, just come on over. Like, don't worry about anything, right? And they show up and there's nothing for them to eat because you've cooked a whole bunch of like, you know, meat and potatoes and things like that. And this person is like vegan. You didn't include them. You didn't really, you welcomed them to dinner, but you didn't take the time to really be inclusive and make sure that you were able to meet their needs. And so this is true. We can apply this whether you have a group coaching program or you're doing an event or you have a Facebook group. Every single community we can look at and say, how are we including people at the margins? And just like I said with the elevator, when we are considering people at the margins who have limitations to participate or barriers to participate, or who are you know, who are part of marginalized communities, when we think about how they are included and what experience they're going to have, I promise you that the experience for every single person in your group is going to be better, because we have so much data to back up that diverse communities have better outcomes. This is why in the tech industry, in the insurance industry, in the education industry are investing all kind of money in pipeline programs. They're not necessarily doing the greatest job, but they invest so much money in pipeline programs to try to diversify the pool, because when you have diverse numbers of people at the table problem solving, the outcomes are better. The businesses do better. They have longer term sustainable solutions to problems. Your client's experience is better. So this is not an option. If you want to have a sustainable business that really changes people's lives and impacts like an intersection of communities, right? Like not just all white folks, but really, and not just like, you know, I have a small percentage. Like, let's look at the percentages of non-white people in your communities. Like, let's look at that and let's understand why. A lot of people don't want to look because they're not sure what to do about it. And I get that. And you need like, you know, compassionate support to be able to figure it out, because there's a lot of stuff. I get that, you know, if something goes wrong or if you miss up there, the internet can be a mean place. And there's a lot of people who will, you know, who are ready to call people out. Like, I get that. And so that incentivizes people to opt out of the conversation. I understand that. But that also impacts your impact, right? Like your ability to do better work and to serve more people is impacted by your discomfort, right? And your unwillingness to really lean in and take this on. It fundamentally changes your business. Let me just take a temperature check real quick. How are y'all feeling right now? Are you okay? Like, I know, are you nervous systems like, you know, fluttering? Like, how are we doing? Feel free to be honest. Good. All right, people feeling good. All right, good. Up and down for days, totally understand that. I'm just reading a question. My question is about how to be inclusive of a variety of varied gender expressions in my women's group beyond making it clear that people whose pronouns are they, them are welcome. yeah, so, you know, what language is always evolving, particularly around gender inclusion, and I keep a close eye on all of these things, obviously, to be able to advise people. And for now, the language that people are using is really all women, right? Like all women are welcome. Not like women and trans women or women and people who identify as women, just all women are included. And you can say, or all women identified people is another thing that people are using. The idea is that you don't want to differentiate between like people, cis women and trans women, that women are women altogether, right? So that's what I'll say about that. And some people are using the Y or the X to just have one slight differentiation. But that's just, you know, it's one of those things that is constantly evolving. Okay. Christina. Hey, Christina. I just unmuted you, I think. Do you have a hand?
Hey, Trudy.
Hey, you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey. Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if this is the right forum to answer this. If it is, great. If not, fine. I am teaching tomorrow, and we're going to be going into ceremony and prayer, as well as calling everybody into action. And I wanted to know what you would want to see in that kind of space. What would you hope would be happening in that kind of space?
I mean, you know, I think this is very dependent on your business and your values. Here is my standard kind of position on this. I am much less interested in having all of you on this call do what I think is right, and much more about supporting you all in figuring out what your values and commitments are, and then creating businesses and practices that are aligned to those values. You understand what I'm saying? I don't believe in like the roadmap, the one way of being, because here's the thing, I have my own commitments. You know, I have my own things that I will do that other people won't do, that wouldn't necessarily make sense in your business. Some of the things that I do in my business, right? That's why my interest is about like helping people get clear on their goals and their commitments, so that the things that are the decisions that you make, that you can stand by. Because if I say, I think you should do this, then when you do it and somebody questions you about it, you're like, I don't know what Trudy told me to do it. I don't know. I don't want that. You know, I want to sit with people. I want people to go through processes and really make intentional decisions, so that when you do something, you can say, yes, this is why we did it, and this is how it reflects our values, and we feel good about it. You know, because haters gonna hate. There's always gonna be somebody who has something to say about what you're doing, right? But like if your behaviors and actions are aligned with your stated commitments and values, and that is explicit, well, people can't hold you accountable to things that you didn't say. People will check you when you say something and you behave in a different way, or when you don't say something at all, right? That's what we see happening. So Christina, like that's my answer there is that that's super nuanced, and I wouldn't be comfortable giving you a really particular answer without knowing more information. I don't think that's
actually really helpful, just because.
Go ahead. What? It's really helpful?
Thank you.
Okay.
It's really helpful because we do actually have a code of ethics that everyone has signed on to, and actually, like you saying, do the thing you're committed to is super helpful because we are clear in our commitments.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, it would be irresponsible for me to be like, I think you should do this, because like I have to know more, you know? All right. So folks are good. Let's see. All right. So diversity and inclusion. Diversity is about numbers of people. diversity is about getting lots of different numbers of people in a room, right? Diversity is not inherently inclusive. It's like the first step. Way back in the day when I started doing this work, it was called diversity training. And it was all about like how to hire folks of color, how to hire Black and brown folks, how to like, you know, like just be prepared to have more students from other countries. Like it was pretty super basic. And I'm happy that we have evolved to language around inclusion and really like thinking about, okay, now that we have people here, how are we supporting them and including them to make sure that their outcomes are equitable? Remember, that's always the goal, that our outcomes are equitable. Now I'll say anti-racism is the explicit, like an explicit way of being that means to that is intended on disrupting racist patterns and racist behavior. So if we assume, and we do assume, that that if we haven't done something to inherently or explicitly disrupt it, that our business is probably inherently racist and that we probably do things, right? And this is, again, it's not about to like call anybody a racist or like to say you're bad, but if we just like without emotion, you know, say that it is likely that I have picked up along the way some patterns and practices that are rooted in racism, right? Which is super likely. And this is not just because we have a lot of white folks on the call. Folks of color, Black and brown folks do this too. We replicate systems of oppression and we replicate racist systems sometimes because that's what we were taught, right? That's how we were taught to do it. And we don't question it because it's so natural. So anti-racism is about taking explicit action to unwind those things in our business, to look at every part of our business and our life and how we show up so that we are taking explicit stands, right? When it's inconvenient. This is one of the reasons why things spiraled a little bit yesterday, because one of the comments that was made in the thread that was shared was that the B School team was not available to the conversation because they were not working on weekends. And, you know, the world doesn't wait to have a crisis when it's convenient. Like, right? Minneapolis is on fire. Philadelphia is on fire. Like, people are in the streets. People are dying. And people need to talk about it, right? People want to talk about it and people need to understand what they can do with their business to take action. And so if you show up in a trusted space and say, hey, how do I respond? And the response you get is, we're not working on weekends, that's just unacceptable, right? You're just, it shouldn't have to be convenient. You should be ready to respond. My plan was certainly not to be on this call with you all, even though I'm happy to be here. But like I said, I had plans this weekend to just like relax. It was actually a really rough week emotionally because of things that are happening in the world. We also have been working on like a research evaluation for a client that was finished Friday. And so I was like, oh, I sent the report out. Like, I'm gonna just chill all weekend. And I text my team and I was like, the report's in, like, we're all good. And not what happened, right? So it can't be convenient for us. Like, we need to be prepared that when the world is on fire, we show up. Right? If we can have an Instagram strategy for every other thing, and if when we're in a launch, we can be sending however many emails we all send, you know what I mean? And like doing whatever other like webinars that we are doing, we put a lot of effort into that, right? And so we show up when we need to, when we're selling something. But if we want to be a leader that really is about justice, about anti-racism, that's ready to respond and hold space for a truly diverse clientele, well, that's not always going to be convenient. And you can have a plan. Again, in your business, you can have a plan for when these things happen. You can have like, okay, the world is on fire plan. And this is what we're going to do. Like, maybe there's some staff that like know that they all work those weekends or whatever. Maybe there's a message that goes out. My lights are falling. You know, anyway, the point is there can be a plan for how to respond, right? To crisis, to social crisis. And there can also be a plan for how to respond when you make a mistake, right? It doesn't have to turn into a big disaster. There could be a plan that would involve taking responsibility, having an apology that doesn't center yourself, telling people how you plan to get help and to do better and restore the community. Not just like, hopefully that it like fades away, but that you're gonna take active space to restore the community, right? Not getting defensive. Yes, thank you. So it's not about getting defensive. It's about getting better, okay? So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like. Yeah, not turning off your comments. Don't turn off the comments, y'all. Don't delete posts. Don't. And getting help, like, you know, have someone, it doesn't have to be me. I would love it if it was me, but have someone, especially if you have a big platform and are looked to by people, that you call, right? That you know, that knows your business, that you have relationships with, that is like on your extended team, that you call when you don't know what to do so that you don't have to clean up. It's much easier for me to get a phone call beforehand than it is to have to come and like clean something up, which, you know, I get those calls too, and it's fine and we deal with it. And again, I'm always grateful for being trusted with some of these things that are super sensitive, right? And like a preventative approach is just much better, you know? Okay, so let's talk about what it looks like, what it takes to be a equitable, diverse, anti-racist leader, okay? So number one, you are driven by your values. I wrote like a little article recently about impact-driven businesses, and I think this might have been my number one point, is that you will live and die by your values. And again, I'll differentiate like this. It doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to say that you're about impact and that you care and that you're, you know, and that you're about justice and that you want to serve everyone and make a difference. But like, if you do, if that's really you, why does my light keep falling? Then you do have to. You are going to live and die by your values because people will hold you accountable to the things that you say. They'll be like, wait a minute, doesn't your website say this? Didn't that email that you sent me say that you're about this? Like, why are you doing this thing on your Instagram? Like, those two things don't match. Like that, we see that happen all the time, right? So if you be driven by your values and take the time to make sure that your values are threaded throughout your company and that your team understand them. A lot of times this happens, like sometimes people will get a lot of attention or negative attention for something and their eyes didn't actually get on it. Like maybe it was a team member or a contractor who like sent out an Instagram post or sent out an email, right? But like you have a responsibility to make sure that your team understands what your commitments are and that they understand like what they should be putting out there into the world. Because at the end of the day, you have to stand by it. And what we don't need is another person to show up online and say, oh, that wasn't me, that was my team. Like the days, that is no longer gonna fly. It's not. You have to be responsible for your team. And the last thing that you can do is to show up online saying, oh, I'm sorry about that email that went out. I didn't write it. That was my team. Like, come on, that's such a cop-out. Like, no. That's you, right? If your team made $1 million, you would take that win. You know what I'm saying? So like, let's own it all. Let's take responsibility for all of it. That's what I'm saying. Okay. So number 2, you have stated commitments and you stand by them even when they're not convenient. We just talked about that. You strive to create diversity, equity, and inclusion and equitable impact in your work. And that this is not an either or. It's not the kind of thing that's like, oh, when I have this successful launch, then I'll do that work. Or when the coronavirus is over, then I'll get to that. Or when, whatever other thing that you're thinking about, then I'll hire a diversity consultant. No, like it's all the same. It's all the same. It's all the same work. You need to be running your whole business with this lens if you're about this life, So you're going to take a holistic approach and look at it everywhere. Which is the next point. You look at every part of your business and make decisions that reflect your commitment. Next, you are more than intentional. You are explicit, and there are no questions about where you stand. People never have to ask me what my stance is on any justice issue. People don't show up in my Facebook group by accident, talking about whatever right-wing conspiracy thing. Like, that doesn't happen, because everything I do is super explicit about where I stand and what kind of audience and community I'm creating. And so that should be the same for you, because if you're creating safe space for Black and brown people, you cannot have racist, especially like overt, explicit, like white supremacists, like chilling in your group like that. No, can't happen. You gotta protect that space, right? And you can do that by being explicit about where you stand, because they'll just leave. Like, they'll just go and find someone else. You are proactive and aware, and you respond quickly, right? You're aware of what's happening in the world. You can't get away with this, like, I don't watch the news. I don't know, or, you don't have to watch the news, but maybe someone on your team could be designated to watch the news for you and let you know if there's something you need to like show up and say, right? Like, you need to have, when you are in a place where you're high profile enough, or you're building a big enough community. I mean, even if it's a small community, if you're really explicit about your commitment and like your commitment to safe space, you need to know if there's another, and I hate to say this, but like, if another Black person dies by the hands of police officers, you need to know that right away. And you can't be caught off guard when someone mentions it in your group. Like, you need to know. You don't necessarily have to go in and like make a thing about it. Like, or make a post about it. Like, you can have a tempered response, but like, you shouldn't be caught off guard, because you need to understand the things that affect your community, right? You don't get defensive, you just do better, right? So that's another part of being an anti-racist leader, is that you don't censor yourself. You learn to take criticism and to identify, like, when someone has, when you or someone on your team has done something that you need to take responsibility for, and you don't get defensive and you don't try to like explain it away. You seek to understand and to learn and to do better. And then you get help, right? One of the first things I used to teach people in this conversation, and I'm telling you, this was early 2018. And there's a lot, and there still is a lot of money mindset work that happens, right? And raise your hand if you've ever done any money mindset work. Probably everyone on this call, right? So money mindset work, what I used to tell people is, I don't have to convince people of this as much anymore. But what I would say is that, we hire money mindset, we get money mindset support because we understand, like, we believe that our ability to earn, right, is linked to patterns that we have about money, subconscious things that are going on that we learned from our parents, from our communities, from TV, and that we hold on to those things, right? Right? Nod with me. This sounds familiar, right? Like we hold on to these things subconsciously, and that those things show up in our relationships. They show up in all kinds of ways. They show up in our relationships around money, whether it's with our partner, with our community, our ability to sell, our decisions about like how much we charge, all of these things, right? And we buy that. We buy into that. Or we accept that. It's not buy in, it's real, right? We believe that that is real. Well, that same pattern of having these subconscious thoughts about race, about identity, about humanity, they are there. We learned those things from our parents, from our communities, from school, from everywhere, right? And those things, unless we do the work to dig them out, they are inside of us. And so there's things that we just can't see. And so we need to be committed to doing the work on an ongoing basis, because at every level that we go up, the bigger our business gets, the bigger our teams get, like we have to level up our preparedness to create safer space. And our ability as leaders is linked to that, is linked to like what we're holding on and our skill around it. And so the same way we get support for all kinds of other things, we need to get support here. We need to get support around and for ourselves to be able to hold it, and for and to train our teams, right? Because and this used to happen. I was a consultant for entire school districts. Like I would go into that work, man, just thinking about it is a little traumatizing. I homeschool just for a point of reference, I homeschool my youngest son because I used to do so much work with school districts, and I was like, this is just craziness. I just can't. So anyway, I used to do this work, and I would go into schools, I would train teachers, I would work with principals, and in some schools we would see the work take, and we would see like people really be excited about it, and in other schools we wouldn't. And then we can also see how some districts would prioritize it over others. And what we saw consistently is that when I was in a district where where the superintendent took the work seriously and who wanted to sit down with me and understand and ask questions and get support from me, from the superintendent, then the superintendent can hold their decision making and empower the other folks in the district to do the right things, like do the things that needed to be done. But if there was a principal who bought in, but the superintendent wasn't bought in, the work couldn't take. So we need our leaders to really be holding it, because at the end of the day, you're responsible. And so we need to be talking about, I call it like, it's a language. It's like fluency. You need to build your fluency to be able to understand and talk about these things, not just to talk about diversity and justice, but to talk specifically about the implications for your business. That is a next level. It's like you can get all the theory around anti-racism and equity and inclusion. And then the next level is like, okay, how do we bake this in? Like, let's look at your policies. Let's look at your practices. Let's look how you coach. Let's look at how you build community. Like, let's look there. It's moving it into practice that it really is what makes the biggest difference. Let me just look here. How do you create safe space for clients when some are doing their own anti-racist work and talking about it, and it seems like it quiets the Black? So you need to find, so Kristen, there are ways to do that. So you can create affinity groups within your community. You can create space for that. You have to create the space for that to happen in a way that's like not in front of other people, because if it's happening in front of other people, especially Black and brown women who haven't consented to be in the conversation, then it's probably quite triggering to them. I mean, I can't say for sure because I don't know them, but like based on my experience, it's probably the case. And so if there are people in your communities who want to have these conversations, then like create space for them to have them. like encourage them to have like a peer group, a study hall, or if it's something that you want to take on in your business and like create that for them, then work with someone to be able to do that. So there are ways to do it, but you want to be able to like contain it, and make sure that it's done in a way that's not that isn't silencing, and that it's also like acknowledging the needs of all of your community members. Okay, let me see, so let's talk a little bit about what this doesn't look like. So it doesn't look like not having the conversation. I think that we see that the days of that are fading. Leaders need to be having the conversations, even if you have a small platform and a small community, or even if you're at the beginning of building your community, you want to be ready to like have these conversations with your people from the beginning. Ignoring it is, I just got an amazing email, and I don't know if Claire is on the call. Claire, are you on the call? But Claire Palitro just sent an email that said, turn off your Facebook ads unless you're Black or brown person. Like, I mean, think about that. Like, just, just for a couple days. Like, just consider it, right? I saw her email. See, I open my emails, y'all. If I'm subscribed to your list, I'm opening your emails. Yeah, like, that is an anti-racist movement, right? Like, that is a decision that is explicitly anti-racist. That may not be in the best interest of her financial bottom line today, but like I said on the video, and my stuff keeps falling on my desk, it might not be the best decision for your financial bottom line, but it is for your moral bottom line, for your spiritual bottom line. It is the right move, So just something to consider. It doesn't look like deleting threads, passing conversations, like telling people to have the conversations on their own pages, telling people that that's not what we do here. Like, that's not what an equitable, inclusive, anti-racist leadership looks like. It doesn't look like oppressive or exploitative contracts or agreements for clients and team members. And, like, I can't like inherently say, oh, this type of clause is oppressive. Like, there's a lot of context that goes into it, but I do advise people to go through line by line and ask themselves, why do we have this? Why do we have this? Is this really needed? Like, maybe yes, it is. And then maybe sometimes no. So really thinking about that. It certainly doesn't look like all white coaching teams and staff, for sure. And also, like, be mindful of, and I've seen this, like all white leadership teams and coaching teams, and then like the women of color, and it could be, other folks of color, but I typically see it as women of color, who are like in administrative roles and like assistant roles. Like, let's think about that. That may not be what you want to create, right? And it happens, and some people don't even notice it, and I point it out, and then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Right? And we can talk about, like, I hear it like, oh, well, this is who applied and the best person for the job. But you can do very specific things to create a more diverse applicant pool in, like, before you are actually making a hiring decision, create a diverse applicant pool. And then your chances that the most qualified person will not be a white person, increase. And then you create more diversity in your staff in ways that don't tokenize people. Okay. Same thing with summits. Big offender here, right? And I work with people who like have summits, and I'll get the emails from people who are like, oh, we're looking to add diversity to our summit. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's not comfortable. It's a really uncomfortable conversation, because then I'll ask them, well, how many white people did you ask to fill up 20 slots? And they'll be like, oh my God, I sent out 20, like 100 emails. I'm like, oh, how many Black women? How many people of color did you ask? I asked 5. Well, according to how math works, no wonder you don't have any. Like, you're not asking at proportional rates. People are going to decline at proportional rates. So how do you make how do you create like diverse applicant pools? And, for some, it's like invitation list for people that are equitably diverse. And then you start having different outcomes. Tokenizing people. And that's just, like the whole, oh crap, I don't have any Puerto Ricans on this. Trudy, can you come and like be on my summit? I forgot about Latinas. Happens. I hate to, I'm kind of like saying it like jokingly, but it totally happens. Saying things like you don't see color, saying things that you treat everybody the same, saying I'm not a racist. Like, don't say I'm not a racist. Like, if someone's telling you did something racist, just listen. And try to separate the idea of I'm not a racist from I did something that is racist, right? Like try not, because when the I'm not a racist, you're making it about you instead about the behavior. And the behavior is actually about somebody else because you impacted somebody else with your behavior, right? So being able to like, in your mind, just be like, okay, just because someone said this to me, I can't take it as a attack of my, my intention or my person, but I do need to address the behavior because there was a direct impact there. Does that make sense? That difference? Yeah, where's my chat? Yeah, people are like, okay, good, cool. What else doesn't it look like? It doesn't look like thrown together. Sometimes the first question I get is like, well, how do I have a scholarship? It's like, I want to have more diversity. Well, how can I have a scholarship? And it's like, that's not where we start. Okay. Like that's problematic on its own because you're assuming that in order to get diversity, well, you're assuming two things. You're assuming that like people of color can't pay for you at your full rate, which is not true. And two, you're assuming that the only people who want to work with you can't, that the only way to get them to come and work with you is about the price. And guess what? That's not why you only have white clients. Like it is not about your price. I used to get a lot, this is like, another thing that I have talked about with people is the idea of like manifestation and how we create our realities and like how we create all these things, right? And so like if we believe that, we need to be open to the fact that we might have created a non-inclusive business. We built that, right? Not that you intended on building it, but that we somehow, because we didn't have explicit action to not have that, we by default created a community filled with people that look like us. That's actually normal. That's actually very normal. It's not something to be ashamed of. It is something to recognize and to address. And it definitely doesn't look like not making investments to address it. Right? This, like I said this before, the same way that we make investments to get other type of support, like this should be something that we're investing in. I get a lot of calls myself, and I get a lot of calls from people who tell me that they get reached out to, and it's like, hey, can you come and talk to my client, talk to my conference about, like, be a speaker at my conference and talk about equity. We're not going to pay you, but we can let you come for free. It'll be good exposure. Like all the right people will be here. I'll introduce you to the right people, right? That happens all the time. So the same way that we would invest in another service, a marketing service, a funnel, someone to build our funnels, a lawyer, like any other profession, like make an investment and don't try to like barter your way into your equity work, because guess what? That's inherently inequitable. Like you can't just you're starting from the wrong place, right? Especially since people who do equity work, are typically people of color, Black and brown people. So invest, right? Invest and, you know, and also just because someone is Black, brown, or a person of color, Black, BIPOC, doesn't mean that they are prepared to like run your diversity program. Like this is a profession, a skill, something that people get trained for, something people go get to school for and have careers around, right? So also, it's not your superstar client who happens to be non-white that you just ask them to, you know, help you build a scholarship program or diversity initiative. By the way, these are real examples. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm telling you things that like actually happen. Okay. So that is, I'm trying to see, did I miss anything here? All I think so. So that's what it doesn't look like. That's what it doesn't look like. And it's really about, hopefully you can see that this is about being explicit, intentional, skilled, highly committed to doing business differently. That's why our new podcast is called Business Remixed, because it's all about like remixing how we're doing things and like really starting to consider, you know, just what we can be doing better and how we can start to rethink some of the ways of, you know, conventional online business building. Okay, so in terms of next steps, what I would love for people to do is really just start to think of what your commitments are. That is a great place to start. Think about what you're committed to and what your values are, right? And then just start to think where am I out of alignment, or where am I not explicit enough, right? That starts to give you some ideas about, you know, where you might be able to invest some time in doing better. This work is not about rushing out to Instagram or to Facebook and telling people how you took a 2-hour training and you are now an equitable, anti-racist person. You do not have my permission to do that. I do not want to see any Trudy said online on about any of those things. This is meant to advance the conversation. I know that some of you have been on this journey for a while. Some of you are newer. Hopefully, no matter where you are, you've gotten something new, gotten some, you know, context. I tried to mix some of the strategies, the things that I was sharing, not make it too overwhelming, but also contribute more nuance to the conversation for sure. So I hope everybody got something, but this is meant to start to advance the conversation and start to give you some insight about where you need to go next. So for some of you who are at the beginning of this journey, your next step is really to start looking at the internal part of this. Thinking about how comfortable is this for you? What's your fluency with this? Have you taken any courses? Have you listened to any podcasts? Have you read any of the books, right? And if you haven't, it's about starting there. It's not about rushing out into the world and telling people you're ready to like take this on, you know, full force. This also is not about trying to turn all of you into diversity, equity, and inclusion experts. It's about doing your work with this lens, right? It's about, that's what it's about. For those of you who are a little farther in the journey and who are thinking about building or who are building businesses and want to do it differently, then you need to look at like, okay, what's my next step? Like, who have I already gathered in my community and where am I falling short? And identify those places. And then for those of you who are on the call who have bigger platforms and teams of people who need to be thinking about this, you need to start thinking about your commitments and your values is a great place, but really thinking about like how committed are you? How committed are you to this? And starting to have conversations with your teams about it and starting to just look at the data. Just look at your communities and say like, where are we right now? If someone scored me on a scale from, 1 to 5 on inclusivity, like where would I be? Just start to look, right? That's your next step. Of course, and then get help. And there are lots of people, You can do all kinds of searches, right? For people who can help in different ways. We would love to help you. Obviously, there are ways for us to help you. And no matter where you are, whether you're at the beginning stages, in the middle, or have teams and need more of a dynamic team approach, we have ways to support you. And the way to do that is to reach out to us and book a call. I'm gonna have my team put a link in the chat that you can just grab. As you can imagine, we're a little bit, it's been a hectic week over here at Team Trudy, a hectic weekend. But we're really grateful to be able to help you, and we would love to talk to you more about your next steps. So again, no matter where you are, the best next thing to do is to book a call. And my team is opening up space. And if you can't get a space, send an email to team@trudylebron.com. And then we'll either hook you up with someone else to talk to you, or we'll figure it out. But those are the ways. We do have a few minutes, and I do want to answer some lingering questions that are here. But I definitely want to, I don't want to let you go without really encouraging you. If you're on this call and you're really committed, I'm not the person to work with if you're just dipping your toe in. Like, again, I work with a lot of people who have really dynamic companies and who are like really committed and who identify part of their soul as an activist and want their business to be a representation of that. And so if that's you, definitely book a call. If that's not you, and if you're just like kind of looking and trying to, like, you just want to make sure that you don't say the wrong thing, definitely there's probably other people's work that you can just follow along on. Rachel Cargill is one of those people that probably a lot of you are following. But if you're ready to get actionable, particularly in business, we want to talk to you about how we could support you. And we have obviously different levels of support that we can provide. So let's go ahead and just take a couple of questions. This might be a little hard, but like, I'm gonna look. I just see one here. I love this is from Michelle Ward. I love what you're talking about.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've been collecting questions.
Oh, you have?
In a Google Doc. So I'm gonna send you the link in the chat, okay? Not everyone's question is there, but
actually, can you just read the question? That would be easier.
Okay, sure.
This is Catalina.
Hi, everybody.
My operations assistant.
All right.
You can see why, because hold on one second. I just want to read this. I just want to read this question because I started to. So let me answer this first. So I love what you're talking about, about internal changes. What about the outward parts of your business? Can you give us ideas about examples of what we can do to bring more people of color into our programs and audience so we can serve them in large numbers too? Yes. So the interesting thing here, like, I'm going to give you such a coaching answer here. This is such a coach answer that it's all about the internal game, right? Like, that is such a coach answer, but it's true. Like, if you start to do the internal work, you start knowing how to show up online, and then people will start to share your stuff. It's a long game. Like, it is. There's no just like thing. It's not about like the stock photos and putting up photos with like diversity in it. Like, you have to start with you and be like, what am I committed to? What are my values? And then it's like, okay, how do I start talking about those values? How do I start enacting on those values and sharing that publicly and taking a stand in my business? How do we tweak our website to demonstrate that these are our commitments, and people start to pay attention? That's how it happens. It's not a marketing campaign. It's about you and what you do to like get yourself prepared and train your team and show up authentically, and then people will find you and they will share you, and you will be a trusted source. Because the last thing you want, I promise you, this is the last thing you want. What the last thing you want is for a whole bunch of people following you from marginalized communities, and you haven't done the internal work, and you're not prepared to handle a mistake that you make or that your team makes, and you break down. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying we've seen that. We've seen it. I don't want to say names. I mean, I kind of want to, but I'm not gonna. Because we all know who they are. We all know the situations. So the last thing that you want is really to just try to make it a marketing campaign. This is long-term work. I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for, but that's the answer I got for you. Catalina, go ahead, give me some, throw me some questions.
Okay, so we also have around 8 people with their hand up.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want me to go to the
Well, let's alternate. So give me, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, y'all.
So something that people this is like a common question around continuing to launch during this time.
Mm-hmm.
How to do that or not do that.
Yeah, so yeah, totally. And I love that question because it's like, you got to run your business, right? Like you absolutely have to run your business. So there's ways to do it. I'm all about the explicit transparency, right? Just being like, hey, I mean, you're gonna say it how you say it, not how I say it, but like, hey, we see the world is on fire right now, and this is how we are feeling about that, right? So you would have that message go out. The worst thing to do is ignore it. But what I have seen done well, and this isn't like a marketing ploy, but what I have seen that comes off real honest and gentle is I've seen leaders come online, come in their communities and talk about the tension and be like, man, like we're in the middle of a launch and like this just happened and we feel real torn about how to proceed. And we don't have all the answers. So we're gonna tread lightly. We're gonna move forward delicately because I'm committed to paying my team, right? If I don't launch, for some of us, this is true. For others, this is not true. But like, if I don't launch right now, I can't pay my team. I can't pay my rent. You know what I mean? Depending on your size of your business. But having those honest conversations with people, in a way, I hate to take the approach of like it protects you, but what it does is connect you. It connects you to people because people get that. People get this like place of being like, oh, I feel really bad and I have to like move forward. So just do your best, like take stock in where we are, get clear about like what you actually need to do. You know, you could say, we're in the middle of a launch and this thing is happening in the world. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go silent for the next 2 days to be in solidarity with whichever movement is happening at the moment. We're going to shut our Facebook ads this weekend. And then on Monday, we're going to resume because we must, you know what I mean? Like you can do whatever you need to do in a way that's transparent. The worst thing to do is to not say anything, to be sneaky about it, to act like it's not real, to act like you didn't know. Again, all of these things that I've seen, right? So hopefully that helps. Let's take a hand. How about that? Just pick someone. Who can I see? Allison Davis.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this and for your team too. Joining in today. My question is around, and Dawn already gave a great answer in the chat too to another person who had a similar question, but my question is around events, and it's twofold. One, I really want to get a set of criteria for myself. Like if I'm invited to speak at an event, I want to know what to ask, and what strikes me is inclusion, not diversity. Thank you for that. At every level, from planning to speaking to audience. I would love any additional feedback and maybe some cues from you that I can use to get myself going on that. And the second is a more frankly burning question that I have, that I feel a little vulnerable sharing, but I'm committed to an event next weekend that is very white. And there's a few other people in the room here too who are at that same event. And I would love your feedback about what I can do now. You know, is it about taking a stand, pulling out? Is it about taking a stand, asking the creators to do something? Do what? You know, how? Because right now I'm not okay with it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a tough one. So a couple of things that come to mind immediately. One is having a conversation with the creators to just be like, hey, I'm noticing this, you know, I wish I would have noticed it sooner. Talk to me about how you made decisions, or talk to me if you thought about this before. Just open up the conversation, and see what they say, and see how see what you feel about what they say. You can tell them, I don't know, is this something that you participate in regularly?
No, but I will, and I'm going to hold myself accountable here and to say that I did raise it early on, and and she was expanding it because it was going to be in person, then COVID, now this,
of course.
and I didn't follow up.
Okay.
I'll own that, you know.
Yeah.
So no, I don't participate, but it is, and she is showing up on social media and things like that, and sort of taking a stand, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't correct what's inherently not okay about it.
Allison, what do you want to do? Like, when you think about it, do you get a hit on like what you would like to happen?
Yeah, somebody in the chat, first I want to give love to her because I know she's doing her best, and I know she's going to watch this recording later.
Okay.
And what I think what I would want is to hit pause and to correct it and then move forward at a later time.
Yeah. So you can ask that. You can ask if that's possible. You can also see if you can defer your space. You can give up. This is one of the things that we teach, is like how to create space, right? And create space means a few things. It's like building safety and like creating communities, right? And it's also about looking at where you occupy space and moving out of the way, right? Sometimes we need to step up, and sometimes we need to step back. If you're going to step back, you want to think about a couple things, because you don't want to run the risk of like tokenizing, right? So if you have someone that you'd like to defer your space to, just having an open conversation about them, and you have to say to them, I don't want to be on this space. I want to defer my space to a Black woman, for example. Do you want the space? Because you want that person to be able to say, no, I don't want that space. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Like, but some people will take that space. Some people want to be amplified in that way, and they'll take advantage of the opportunity, right? So it's all about transparency, right? So that is another possibility. Another possibility, and I don't know, like, to the extent to which you're contractually obligated, but if you're not, to just to defer your space, to just say, I'm not going to participate. I don't recommend that one, because I want people to follow through on their commitments. And the last thing you can do is you can use your space to acknowledge the lack of diversity. You can get up there and do your thing and say, and I just want to notice, I just want to recognize that part of the problem, you know, that this is part of the problem, that we're in a moment in our social climate, and that I'm feeling really tender and conflicted about being here today. I'm happy to be with you. I'm happy to be a trusted person. And I really wish this was a more diverse and inclusive space, which is super uncomfortable and is going to make people shift. But like, transparency and being explicit is like my recipe, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel perfectly equipped to do that. I just, if I'm being honest and speaking my heart, I just not sure that was enough, and wanted to put it out there, you know? Yeah.
And you can say like all the things. You can be like, I'm super conflicted, and I thought about not coming, and I thought about giving up my space, and like, and here I am, and there's something to learn here, and I hope that in the future this is different, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And in the future, ask ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm getting that criteria together.
Totally.
I won't be in this position again.
And this is the thing, we could systemize this, right? This is what I mean when I'm like, okay, it's one thing to know the things, and it's a different thing to put it in your business. Like, it could be part of your plan, the way that you do business, to be like, oh, you want me to speak? Okay, here is what I speak, and you have to or I decline.
Yeah. I want to call myself out too, because I just said I won't be in this position again, which is bullshit. That's not what I mean. What I mean is I want to be committed to amplifying the experience of others. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right. Gata, give me another question from the chat. Yep. You there?
Yeah, hi, sorry. Okay. I'm gonna do like merge a couple questions just to
Okay.
get, so talking about like safe space, someone asked about whether safe space can actually exist, and if or is it more like anti-racist spaces?
Mhm.
And then someone else just asked alongside that if they want to navigate these conversations with like an only white affinity group, what are like ways to do that
Yeah. Oh,
that are not like,
yep.
yeah.
Got it.
My screen is freezing, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay, cool. So first question, can there be safe space? You know, safe space is one of those things. It's like you can never fully guarantee safety in any space, right? So you want to do your best to create it. You want that to be the goal, and you want to create community guidelines and walk people through a process, and create like standards for like processes for doing that. And what you really want to invite people into is brave space. And brave space is about understanding that there is some risk and that it requires a vulnerability and discomfort and agreement, like a unity around the values and the commitments and the goals that you create. Like, right, everybody agrees to like your community standards, and also recognizing that there might be mistakes. And then being prepared to handle the mistakes. Right, coming up with a process for handling that in a restorative way, restoring the community, restoring any harm that has been done, right? So your process isn't just about like creating the space and making the rules, but also saying, well, if there is a breach of trust here in some way, like what is our obligation to restoring it? And that's going to be different whether you're talking about a Facebook group with 30,000 people in it. That's like a free Facebook community where you can just like remove people, versus like people who have invested to work with you. And, you know, that's different. And so you treat them different accordingly, right? The other question about affinity groups. So affinity groups are tricky. It's funny because the report I referred to earlier was all about that. And affinity group work is best done when it is under the guidance and support of Black women or women of color, people of color, right? Now, how that gets done varies based on your business and based on your community, but it should be happening in partnership, right, in some way. And so there's lots of ways to organize that partnership. Now, there is one thing happening right now, very timely, that a lot of people are getting together to read and discuss the workbook by Layla Saad, White Supremacy and Me. And that the design of that book is for white people to get together and read it and talk about it and do the work. And so that is a white affinity space under the guidance of Layla Saad, right? And so like and there might be people who have a different stance there, but my goal, I would never, you know, Layla is, you know, excellent at what she does, and that is her intellectual property. And it was designed with that intent. So I'm not going to question like her intention in the design of the book. So I would say that that's one way to go. And that's like first level stuff though, right? Like that's not going to teach you how to like actually apply it. That's going to help you like uncover some stuff. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can get another, let me see if I find another hand. So we got a few more minutes here.
Do you want me to read you a name?
Where are hands? Yeah, read a name, read a name, and then they can just unmute themselves. Yeah.
All right, we got Kristen Arnett.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Oh, thank you so much. I am furiously typing.
Okay.
So I have a couple notes here. It actually relates to affinity spaces. A couple years ago, I wanted to start something called Beauty Inclusion. And then I got a little paralyzed because it's the same thing of here I am as a white woman, and what do I have to do leading a space about this topic? So I work in the beauty industry. I've been a makeup artist for a long time. And I always assumed that people knew, of course I work on every skin tone. Of course I am inclusive. I'm a gay woman.
Right.
So, right. Like, I mean, just all of that. I ended up putting a value statement on my website. And then I backed away from doing this work. And I asked someone who is in an educational space to partner with me to sort of lead these conversations. But I really stopped. And yeah, I'm quite conflicted about it because I do have a strong value system. I do want to use my platform for this. And I don't want to center myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I'm glad that you're in that, that you're there. I have okay. So I'll say this, y'all, I'm a social scientist at my core. And so there's a lot of people who have ideas about like what should happen, what shouldn't happen, based on all kinds of things. My interest is really, especially professional interest, is in what's effective, right? Like what is going to work. And so there is plenty of evidence that what works, what does work and honors the not centering anti-racist approach is co-run like mixed race partnership. And so, I mean, I have done diversity and equity work in rural Maine, and I won't do that unless I'm with a white person. Like, I wouldn't go into the school system to do work there without a white person who can like culturally translate for me. And because it was like not the greatest experience. So Kristen, if this is work that you're called to, and I believe that, right? We have callings, like there's something in us that's like, this is the work you're supposed to be doing, right? And so if that is there, find someone to partner with you who has the same mission and collaborate on the project. Like you can still have your business, right? Like there's all kinds of ways for partnership work to happen. But, I would say do the work in partnership with people of color, with Black and brown folks.
Yeah, I will add, and she kind of backed away a little bit too, because I had moved my platform from this umbrella site that had a more generic name. It was called Green Beauty Team. Mm-hmm. And I umbrellaed it into my own name. And it was at the exact same time of this. And she said, well, you know what, in my experience, now I'm not doing it so much as a team, it's going under your name, and I've been burned in the past by other women. Yeah. And so I no longer feel like I want to do this, but if you want to do it separate from your business, then that's okay. And yeah, again.
Yeah, it could be a project that you work on collaboratively. I think that that person is correct. I would have had the same conversation with you. You don't want that to be under your personal brand, especially if there is a partnership from a Black woman or other women of color who is equally contributing, but it's under your business, which is named your brand. Like that's silencing, it's oppressive. It's not inherent. It's not like you're doing things intentionally to oppress, but you're going to be centered, right? But there's no reason why Kristen as a brand and this other woman as a brand can't collaborate on a project.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Next question from the Google form.
Perfect. What are your thoughts on where equity and inclusion belong in coaching ethics as an industry? I
think that it should be there. I think that it is there. I think that like the IFC, that they have a statement around diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't necessarily think that it's in a way that's explicit enough. And also, like the coaching industry is a mixed field, right? Not everybody are certified coaches. Not everybody is the same type of coach. And so I am also against like standardizing it. Like, I don't believe that coaches should be licensed, because that is another way, based on history, to oppress and marginalize people. So I think it should be there. I think it's non-negotiable, but obviously I also think that there are people who what I don't want is for people who don't believe in equity and diversity and inclusion to be faking like they are, because like it's in a standard somewhere. You know what I mean? I want those people to be super clear that they want to be only working with white folks. I think I think that you need to be personally making decisions about how it shows up in your business. And I think that's better than any code of ethics that can be created by an industry. It's like, what's your code of ethics? You know? All right, let's take maybe one more hand.
Want me to read it to you?
No, like one more hand, like let's call on someone to.
Kelly Ruto.
Hi, thank you so much. This is literally the best 2 hours I could have spent on a Sunday by far. Absolutely incredible. Okay, so here's my question for you, and this is probably, and I apologize for the noise in the background.
Okay, no problem.
The minute you start talking, somebody has to mow their lawn. You know that's how that goes.
I'm surprised it's been so quiet here, actually.
Okay, so here is my question, and this is opening a bit of a Pandora's box, but I think it has to be asked.
Yep.
So yesterday on Facebook, I had a lot of interaction that unfortunately ended up turning into a coach who then went over to IG and publicly bashed me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And I'm not that fragile, so it's totally fine. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
What I ended up getting were a lot of DMs from people saying, I'm watching what's happening to you, and this is why I don't speak up.
I love that.
Yeah, so I keep saying—
I don't love that, actually.
No.
I'm sorry that happened, but I love this question.
Yeah, no, I have tough skin and I don't love it either. And what I keep saying to people is, and I'm so glad that you kind of doubled down on this, like we have to start with our values, and then we have to go, be clear about our intentions, and then we have to build into a practice. And a practice, by definition, takes time, which means we're gonna mess up. Exactly. We are going to mess up, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there and do your very best, and also say, I'm doing the best I can, and I will commit to doing better.
Yep.
But I think when somebody gets really, really angry and then takes it and runs with it and says, look at this person. She says she's one way and she's not, and she's doing a crappy job.
Right.
Everybody else who's watching it, who maybe, doesn't feel equipped to deal with that, is either going to stop showing up or stop doing the work, or say, forget it, I was going to show up, but I'm not going to. So that's not me. I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep doing the work. But again, I don't know what to say to them other than the one thing I can tell you that I can't sleep with is silence. Like I can't go to bed at night. Yeah. I can be okay with screwing up and making mistakes and all of that, but I can't be okay with doing nothing.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about that? Because I think it's a big issue, and I think women, especially white women, obviously, are afraid to even ask that question.
Yeah, I know. And you can be such a big example of how to handle this, right? So you can, what I would advise and what I try to help my clients do, I mean, this has happened to people I work with, is to make a statement on like what has happened and where you stand. Mm-hmm. And also tell people that you don't need to be defended.
I'm so glad you said that, because I actually said that. I'm like, I'm good. You don't have to defend me. I'm not that fragile. Like, just go do the work.
And take it as an opportunity to double down and say, like, even when it's scary, we have to commit. Like, we have to stand up to our values. Like, to just that explicit acknowledgement of like, yeah, it sucks to have people on Instagram trashing me or whatever is happening, and it's hard. And I feel aligned with my values, right? And I'm going to continue to show up, and you should too, because that's what we want. We want people to be empowered and to be true and authentic, right? And so leaning into it instead of fading to the background like Homer Simpson meme, right? Like we want to lean in and really be like, no, this is our time to stand up, because we can, because we have the privilege of people paying attention to us, right? Like that is an honor. I say all the time, like, sure, were there other plans for this weekend? Yeah. I am deeply honored to be on this call.
Yeah.
You know, I'm to be a trusted voice. So for you to say like, yeah, like I'm gonna be louder, you know what I mean? And to encourage people to say like, no, I'm leading by example here, and I'm gonna keep showing up.
Yeah, and I think white women have to say we have to give ourselves permission to make mistakes and then commit to doing better, not to use, well, I'm not perfect, I made mistakes as a cop-out, but to say literally this is part of the actual learning process. We are going to screw up, and we're going to have to say we screwed up, and then say, and also I am committed to learning and doing better, and that we're really not that fragile. Like we can take the pounding on Facebook and be okay with it.
You'll be fine. Exactly. Exactly. And that's it. All it is fear. It's that like fear of being seen in a negative light, and, you know, and not knowing what to say, and having negative attention and things that are untrue. But like, we can experience hard stuff, like, especially, and this is why like that values part and that commitment part is so important, because when it's in defense of your values, it's just so much easier.
Yeah. And it's, you know what, I so appreciate you saying that, because that's where it got out of control. I defended a value that I had about not outing somebody without proof, and got accused of protecting Marie Forleo. And that is not where I was coming from. And I think that it's really important to stick to your values and say, I will call it out as soon as I have all of the facts. And some people are just not going to be okay with that. And that has to be okay. That has to be okay.
Yeah. But it's important too, to not speak too soon. Right. Because
that was the lesson learned. Holy cow. Because somebody said to me, what was your takeaway? And that was it.
So Kelly, in that, what you can acknowledge, you can hold the space of what I call yes and, right? Like, it's both. It's that you made a mistake, right? You probably could have held back on sharing whatever it was.
Absolutely.
Until you had a fully formed opinion, you know what I mean? On what exactly to say. Because if you don't, because here's the thing, like if you say something without proof, you're causing more harm.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I totally do. And I think what was unfortunate was that the whole point of the post was something totally different. But what happened was somebody said, well, I want you to call out who it was. And I said, but that's not what this post is about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So it morphs.
And, I will say, good. So good. I'm glad that you feel like you got something from the experience. What I try to encourage people to do is like, when you're closely in touch with these dynamics, you're just so less likely to make that mistake. You know what I mean? Like, because you're just like, I see all the dynamics here. I see all of what's on the line here. And I shouldn't speak on it unless I can speak on it fully, or, so I'm going to wait. So, like, it is important that when things happen that we're explicit about, like, yes, this happened in Marie Forleo's group. Like, y'all don't know how hard it is for me to talk about this, because I love me some Marie Forleo. Like, y'all have no idea that this is like, the fact that this is the way that people are paying attention to the conversation hurts me a little bit. But like, I had to speak up, because it's my commitment, right?
Of course.
So I could have been like, no, I'm not gonna say anything, because one day I hope she invites me on Marie TV and I don't want to be mad at me. You know what I mean? Like, no, like I can't
But I
can't do
appreciate
that.
that about, I really do appreciate that about you. And I think that that garners an immense amount of respect for you because of that. And
Well-
so my job is to circle back around and say, here are the lessons I've learned. And I also think my job is to de-center myself
Yes.
and say my job, and I put up a post about this yesterday. I said, my job is now to just bring forward women of color who are doing incredible work, who need to be showcased, and use my platform for that, and just shut up about the rest of it, really. Like that's a better use of the platform.
Until you're ready. Like you can be ready to speak on it, right? Like, but it just takes, you can get there. It's like I said before, it's a fluency.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this and I appreciate your answer. Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. All right. It is just after 3:00. Vita is gonna put some music on for us. And I am going to thank you so much for being here. This is a little overwhelming. And but I'm just so happy that you all have trusted me, have come, have listened so openly, have asked questions, have joined me online in the various platforms. It really is a deep honor. And I really want to encourage those of you who are ready to take the next step to book a call, talk with my team, and let's see how we can support you, whether you're at, when you're high profile, big platform, and we need to work together one-on-one to look at your business and how to support you and your team, or whether you're like, I am, just trying to grow my business and I want to grow it the right way from the start and I need that kind of support. We can support you in either of those journeys. Thank you so much for being here. See ya.